Tu tawa mai e raro, tu tawa mai e roto, tu tawa mai e waho. Ke tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Me mihi aho e te mana whenua o Taranaki, ara ko Taranaki te maunga, ko te taere ko te moana, me waiwaka iho te awa. No Uropi me e nā rangi o ko tīpuna, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko te Bijoux te whānau, ko Denise tēnei. Haere mai ki te hui nei, nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to today's webinar, everyone. Kia ora from a very sunny Tamaki Makaurau. I'm Denise Bijoux and I'm one of your hosts today. Thanks very much for joining us to explore. We're going to explore how rangatahi are leading locally, their experience, what they're doing in places across the motu, across the country, the changes they're making, what's helping their mahi and the challenges they face, quite a lot. We'll also discuss how organisations, how agencies, and those who are no longer youth ourselves can support and enable youth to lead in ways that work for them. They're awhi, that amplify their abilities to turn their ideas into realities and have an impact in their communities and beyond. Today I'm co-hosting this webinar with the beautiful Talei Bryant, who is coming to us from Whakatane, I believe. Among many other things, Talei runs Inspiring Stories Whakatane Future Leaders Program, does some awesome mahi with Ara Taiohi, and is the youth rep on the Whakatane Youth Board. Talei, please introduce yourself and let's begin our session together.
Cool, thank you, Denise. Kia ora everyone, so lovely to be here today. My name is Talei. I was born in Nelson and bred here in the beautiful Waimana Gorge, which is just outside of Whakatane. And yeah, I'm just very excited to be here, see some familiar faces, and I hope you guys have an awesome time. But don't want to keep you guys up much longer. So I just want to introduce our amazing panelists for today. We have Gemma Major, who is a part of Te Akamatua, a community-led initiative supported by Seed Waikato. We also have Madiha Ali, who is Seed Waikato committee member, and she is also a law student and a youth worker. And then finally, we've got the amazing Guy Ryan, who is the founder of Inspiring Stories, who will be talking about his role as the founder and Future Leaders Program. So good to see you guys today. I hope that everyone enjoys what you have to say. I know that I am. But firstly, I just want to pass it over to Madiha and just tell us a bit about how it is being a rangatahi leader in your community.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I will be speaking more about my own personal experiences as an ethnic rangatahi in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and also wanting to share my experience working as a youth worker with ethnic rangatahi and that experience and the experience of ethnic rangatahi. In terms of my own personal experience, my roots go back to Pakistan, and I've been in New Zealand for only 3 years now. And when I came to New Zealand, it was a really different culture, and I was hit with this culture shock of how different things worked here in New Zealand. And I think one of the biggest things that I felt during the first couple of years, even now to this point, is how different I looked whenever I was in a room. And I always felt like I was the one person standing out. I always felt like I was the one person who looked different and sounded different and just felt different. And most of the times I felt like I did not belong in the room. And that experience kind of created this whole identity crisis in me as to who I am, what is my role, what am I doing? And I struggled with it for quite a bit. And I think what didn't help was that a lot of the places that I stepped in were not built in to be inclusive and welcoming for people from different backgrounds and communities, and people with different lived experiences. And so when I started working as a youth worker at Shama in 2019, it was a really different experience, because I was still trying to navigate my own way in New Zealand and trying to learn how things worked, and I was still learning so much about myself and about this new country that I was aspiring to call home. And now I was put in a leadership position for all these other ethnic Rangatahi who had similar experiences as myself. And so when I started working as a youth worker, what I really noticed was that there was a huge gap between the mainstream services that were being provided for young people and whether or not there was accommodating for ethnic Rangatahi. And what I noticed was that it didn't. There are so many services currently in Hamilton that are such amazing services for young people. However, those services do not always cater to ethnic young people's needs, because the spaces are not created in a safe, in a way that caters to our young people's needs, our ethnic young people's needs. And what I also noticed from that experience was that did not come from a place of not wanting to include, but that came more from a place of not knowing how to include. The mainstream services were not equipped with, simply did not know, they were simply not aware that they were not including other people. They were unintentionally excluding other people from other backgrounds and other lived experiences. And so once we started having conversations, and once I started to mention this thing, that there's this gap and our ethnic youth do not feel welcomed and do not feel safe always in the spaces that are being created, I started to see a change, which I'm really happy about. And I think I can definitely say at this point that from when I started working as a youth worker initially in 2019 and now, I can definitely see that there has been a change in the youth sector. I think one way I would say I've seen that change is that more people are wanting to engage ethnic communities in decision making. And another way I can also see the changes that community-led projects are wanting to add an ethnic representative, or wanting to have an ethnic representative to hear that ethnic youth voice, which was missing when I first joined the youth sector. And so it simply strengthened that idea that it's not people not wanting to include, it's people not knowing how to include. And once we start having those conversations and once we start to talk about it, and once that awareness is there, that people are actually really welcoming, and people in Hamilton are amazing. I think one thing I love about Hamilton is how welcoming and amazing people here are. Like, there's so much warmth, and it's just a matter of having those conversations. But I think on the end of mainstream organizations and other communities, I would say it would be great, it would be amazing, it would be really helpful if whenever we do something, to ask those questions of who are we including, who are we excluding, whose voice is here, whose voice is missing, who don't we have on the table, and how can we make this space a safe space for everyone who comes and walks into this room. And so asking simply those questions, because at the end of the day, safety and belonging is created by very small things. It doesn't take a lot of work. It's simply making sure that all our communities feel welcomed and safe. So I think definitely some curiosity, some openness on the end of the mainstream organizations, other people around us, to have that openness and curiosity to ask, how can I make this space safe for you? Because I would have loved it when I was ethnic young. I still am an ethnic young person, but when I first joined, when I first came to New Zealand, I would have loved it there were spaces that felt safe for me, so I could be more included and more, and I could participate more in the community. And so I feel like it's really empowering to see more ethnic representation, more ethnic youth voices being heard, because I think we definitely do have a lot of potential within the communities. We just need to amplify those voices. So that would be my experiences as an ethnic Rangatahi, and then working as an ethnic youth worker, and my role at this point. Kia ora.
Ngā mihi, Madiha. That was so beautiful. Sorry, I'm just going to quickly shut my door right here. This is the Zoom. The part about Zoom I hate is like when all those sounds come up and people are doing their lawns. But thank you so much. Your korero was beautiful. And I just want to touch on the point you said, how when you started as a youth worker in 2019, how those the spaces weren't so accommodating, and how you said people, it's not like they don't want to include, they just don't know how to. And now that voices are being heard and there's more representatives, I just think that shows a beautiful, beautiful amount of growth. And just want to mihi you and all the mahi you do. So thank you. And yes, whānau, if you've got questions, I know we all have a lot of questions. There will be a session at the end of all of our panelist speakers. So check them in and we'll answer them later on. But now I'd like to pass it over to Gemma. Oh no, sorry, Denise. Just kidding.
Oh, good. Thank you, Talei. Thank you so much, Madiha. I think one of the things that's coming up for me as I'm thinking about the Inspiring Communities theory of change, I think there's a slide that can come up for people who don't know what this is or haven't seen it before. Backroom people. But one of the things I'm thinking about is that, and how it's based on the premise that all communities have the ability to thrive, particularly when the conditions are there that create trust and relationships and welcoming and those things you were talking about, Madiha. And the theory of change, you can see it there, basically says that people harness their loose connections and the loose connections of their loose connections when they see possibilities for how things could be better, just like you did, Madiha, but by talking about those things that other people weren't seeing or could see and didn't know what to do about or with. And I think it's the how is really key for me and what you're talking about. They're doing things with curiosity and openness, for example. And I guess, well, not I guess, I really feel that it's about being prepared to change ourselves, especially perhaps when we are mainstream, you know, and as an organisation, as a person. And that's the other thing, that there's these scales, I'm sure Gemma will probably talk a bit about this as well, of personal development in this space and openness and curiosity, as much as there is organisational or collective, you know, a cohort by age or whatever. I also want to just say that, you know, that moving from loose connections to collaboration and through that sort of space, it's not a smooth process. Diagrams make things look so clean and easy. Just follow this and everything will be sweet, but there's all sorts of curveballs, and that's why it goes off to the side for that growth as well. So yeah, really want to thank you, Madiha. That was a great korero. And Gemma, I know you've used that theory of change a little bit. Do you want to chip in here and tell us a bit about what you've been doing?
Of course, morena e te whānau. E whānau mai au I te taha o te awa o Brisbane, I raro I te maru o te maunga o Mount Tambourine, he uri ahau no United Kingdom no Europe, hei te noho au kei Kirikiriroa, o Gemma toku ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. Good everybody, I'm Gemma. Quick introduction, mother to Malachi, he's 2 years old and the love of my life. I coach and guide visionaries, creatives, entrepreneurs, innovators, social change makers to cultivate greater self-leadership. And I'm here today to talk to you about my role in Te Aka Matua, a youth-led initiative that was led in my time at Seed Waikato. And so that kaupapa really came to life after looking at many of the findings of research and connecting in with different leaders within the youth community, and just being a student of lived experience, a student of their lived experience, and getting really curious about how do we build the capacity and capability for these young leaders to act and be the hero in their story. And so for the first couple of years in my role at Seed Waikato, we did a number of research projects on mental health and addiction, on political engagement, and around holistic well-being. And while it was really great to be able to elevate youth voices, and something that was missing in the ecosystem at the time, we started to get really curious about, well, how do young people get to not only identify their aspirations and the things that are in the way, but have the capacity to do something about it. And how might we look at the inequities in that way to kind of work in servant leadership for the local youth community, and in that lens, look at how we might backfill. We're in a position of privilege as an organization with resources, with capacity. So what might we do to support the local community, the local young people, the local youth leaders to move in a cohesive way? So this was then about how we move from research on behalf of to creating autonomy and creating that space for choice, for voice, and for them to step up and be able to lead the change that they are so capable of. And so as this process began, it was really important to examine what does it look like for us to focus on integrity of process versus integrity of the objective or the perceived outcome. Because if we fixated on a particular objective or outcome, we would miss the magic. And so to focus on integrity around process was to really ground ourselves in the theory of change there for CLD. And understand that there's varying levels of youth engagement. There's throwing the pizza together and getting some youth voices. And there's understanding the ways in which young people vibe and meeting them there. There's varying levels of positive youth development where we want to create a specific outcome or objective and do that with a set of parameters and a set project. And there's where we embed leadership within young people to go far beyond the project or the initiative to continue being the drivers of change in their community. And there's varying levels of community-led development. And so there was opportunity always in this facilitation of this project that was brought to life to look at what depth we would go to with this. So, you know, and part of supporting youth-led change, we need to decide where on the spectrum you want your project to go. And actually, where on the spectrum do young people want the project to go? And is it even the right project? Because young people know best. So what I discovered was that young people are really tired of these extractive processes and approaches that lead to nothing, because there's a change in leadership, there's a change in position, who's holding the role that was facilitating, there's a change in strategic plan. And so what the facilitation was about was really understanding what does reciprocity look like, sound like, and feel like beyond my time facilitating. And that looked like building the capacity and capability of the group to be self-governing, which is what ended up happening towards the end. And I'm getting to talking about the project. Wanted to give a bit of context. And young people are tired of being asked what their problems are. Okay, our young people have dreams, our young people have aspirations, and while it's a privilege to dream, I think there's an opportunity here for those that have the privilege and the resource to be able to understand how might we backfill so that young people can be the hero in their story of their dreams, of their aspirations. Excuse me, I just need to cough. So just briefly talking to the kaupapa, after COVID last year, the local youth sector here was calling for greater wellbeing support and greater cross-sector collaboration. I saw an opportunity for us to leverage the diversity and strengths of the local youth sector and co-design an initiative that would empower our marginalised communities to connect, grow, act and organise. We ran a series of hui, lying in the grass, and spent months getting to know each other, months, not even talking about what we're going to do, just hanging out. In a real, authentic and vulnerable way, and creating safety, as Madiha said, for each other. And it was a really unique experience to be bringing Māori, Pasifika, queer, disabled and ethnic young people together. And what does it look like to create safety and belonging with so many different communities there? What ended up happening was the crew co-created and is in motion a How to Human guide, which looks specifically at safety and belonging for each of those communities. The co-design crew co-created a wellbeing wānanga to fill up the cups of the local youth sector. This looked like an unconference, and we had breathwork facilitators come in and sound healers. and 29 youth orgs coming along with 95 youth workers represented there. And we wanted to create this reciprocity of well-being, knowing that that is such a significant challenge for our young people right now. And on the last day, we dived into some research, some questions, getting curious about the youth sector and started to explore their aspirations. The co-design group then came back together, unpacked the findings, and a local social scientist here reviewed the themes that then informed the strategy. So as Madiha said, safety and belonging is fundamental and is not achieved with pizza. And someone they don't have a relatable lived experience to coming in to extract. Backfilling is so critical. How can we become attuned to the strengths and gifts of the local youth sector and work to backfill the missing pieces so that the sum becomes greater? I just want to quickly draw on that fourfold practice there. We need great self-leadership for great facilitation. And I just want to draw on that be present piece there. Host yourself. And so as I reflect on, my facilitation in this project, the self-inquiry was around, am I grounded? Am I regulated? What energy do I need to draw on today? How might I hold the agenda lightly and create space for powerful possibilities that I can't see? How might I listen to understand rather than listen to achieve my agenda or my organization's agenda? And that micro-credential in CLD that Inspiring Communities offers is incredible and really solidified the languaging around all of this to deeply challenge and stretch the edges of this approach for organizing for social change. I'll leave it there.
Kia ora, ngā mihi, Gemma, holy heck. I was listening like, oh, I need my book for my notes. That was very cool. Love the fourfold practice, and I love how you guys are rangatahi led and how you talked about when you came together with your group to co-design, it wasn't just chucking pizzas on the table, getting them for a couple of hours, extracting their ideas and then see you, but you guys actually, created those genuine connections and they were there for the whole process. And so many questions. Again, whānau, if you got your questions, put them in, but we will have a time at the end of this session to go over them. Thank you again, Gemma. And I think what you have spoken about really resonates with one of the principles through under Manatahi. So I work part-time for Aratahi, delivering the Manatahi sessions, which is all about, it's sort of like a youth framework for everyone and anyone can use it. So yeah, what you spoke on really resonates with whaiwahitanga, which is one of the 8 or 9 manatahi principles, and it's all about acknowledging the mana that rangatahi have and providing safe spaces for them to uplift themselves and giving them responsibility, giving them a safe space to participate. So that's really cool. And just a little shout out to Aratahi here, because I know some of you are watching. So let's go. And if anyone wants to participate in any manatahi sessions and learn more about this, then hit us up. But following on from your korero and from this uplifting rangatahi korero, I would like to pass it over to the wonderful Guy Ryan.
Kia ora whānau, and kia ora Talei and fellow panelists. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and the opportunity to build on such rich insights and korero that has already been shared. So my name's Guy. I'm based in Wellington at the moment. I'm a father. I've got 2 young boys, 1 and 4. But I grew up down on the west coast of the South Island in a tiny little place called Rangatahi. If anyone's been to the west coast, I know there's a few familiar faces and names on the call at the moment. And going through university, the first in my family, as a young person, really learning about a lot of the big issues in our world, like climate change, the huge inequality that exists. I started feeling really confronted and really overwhelmed by these challenges that I think, especially with the internet and social media, are more visible than ever before. And at the same time, I could see this incredible creativity and possibility of my peers and students around me when I was at uni. And I had this idea. I thought, imagine if every young New Zealander realised their potential to change the world, and what would it take to make that happen? And that was a big, bold vision for a 24-year-old, and through that set up an organisation called Inspiring Stories with that vision at the centre. And it's been 10 years, and over the last decade, we've built a range of different programs and partnerships and pathways, including Festival for the Future, which some of you may be familiar with, which is now the biggest social innovation summit in the country. We're very lucky with COVID, end of July, to host about 1,600 people who were involved in that summit this year. We run the Impact Awards, where we give out now $30,000 to young people who are making a difference for our communities and country across 6 different categories, across climate, enterprise, inclusion, wellbeing, local and global impact categories. And then we also run a year-round leadership program for Rangatahi, which is place-based, called Future Leaders, which Talei is our wonderful coach for the Whakatane chapter of the Future Leaders program, which also runs in Korero, Opotiki, Kaikohi, Whakatane and Whangarei in grade enough. So 6 chapters there at the moment, which combines different layers of mentoring, coaching, different workshops, opportunities to connect, build skills, and a big focus on project-based learning. So young people coming up with ideas to make a difference in their community, and then working to develop and implement some of those ideas and projects. So that's been hugely varied over the last few years. But over the decade, we've had about 12,000 people, or over 12,000 people, come through the programs over the last decade. We've given out about $85,000 directly to young people in awards and funding to help support their projects or their ideas further. And collectively, with support of our community, we've put over $2.5 million into scholarship opportunities for young people to access opportunities. And to give you a sense of, some of the amazing youth-led mahi and projects that we've seen come out of that work over the decade, including through our Future Leaders program on the ground in the regions. Even in recent times, our Future Leaders have coordinated and distributed hundreds of care packages to support vulnerable people in whānau last year when COVID lockdown hit. Our Future Leaders have led a range of different projects around, including Talei and Whakatane, around local body elections and increasing youth participation and representation in local body elections, including young people running for council. I think that was one of the major themes at Festival for the Future in 2019 was the upcoming local body election, and as a result we had heaps of Rangatahi put up their hand, including Talei, to run for local body. And I think have also helped to contribute a small part in increasing representation in local body elections across the country. And so many other amazing youth-led projects. School Strike for Climate would be something that people would be familiar with. Building a whole range of different purpose-driven ventures and social enterprises that young people are leading. So a huge range there to give you a sense. And whilst Future Leaders is place-based, Festival for the Future, of course, it's a publicly ticketed event. And then we also undertake a huge scholarship program. So working to increase access this year for about 300 people who may have received either like ticket or transport or accommodation support to be there at Festival for the Future. And that includes, for some of those rangatahi, they might be leaving their region for the first time in their life to come on a plane and come to Wellington to attend Festival for the Future. And also in that room at Festival or the Impact Awards, when we're working to just increasingly make it as intergenerational as we can. So working to increase the connectivity and support around the aspirations and dreams of young people who are driven to make a difference for our community. So that might, that meant that we had like 15 mayors from across New Zealand in the room at Festival this year. We had, government ministers and chief executives and really trying to increase that intergenerational approach and opportunities for connectivity and collaboration. to address some of the challenges that we face together. So that's a bit of a snapshot of the mahi that we do as an organisation at Inspiring Stories. You know, as a founder and as a CEO, there's always a delicate dance around the financial viability of trying to provide support pathways for rangatahi, and also trying to balance the financial sustainability of an organisation and support a team who do the mahi. And as Talei knows, there's various challenges and ups and downs as part of that journey. We're a charity, and in some ways we operate like a business, like with Festival for the Future. We'd sell tickets, we'd do sponsorship, we'd sell tables to the Impact Awards. And then something like our Future Leaders program on the ground in the regions is fully free for rangatahi in those 6 communities. And it's mostly funded through grants and philanthropy. So for our Future Leaders, more than 70% of our Future Leaders identify as Māori, so really high proportion Māori population communities that we're running there. And most of our Future Leaders identify as wahine, young women. And the diversity of the community, I guess, that would interact with the different programs across Festival, across Future Leaders, across the Impact Awards. It's pretty diverse, and we do our very best in terms of trying to create inclusive spaces. And there's complexities in that when you've got such a diverse range of people that are interacting with some of those different experiences as well. So that's kind of a snapshot in terms of our mahi at the moment. And we've got a board of trustees. We've got a team of about 20 of us kind of on the ground in different communities across the country. So I might park it there. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Guy, thank you. Oh, beautiful. Always love hearing about the kaupapa and just how much of an impact you can have sort of when you have a dream and then you go on to pursue it, and then now you can just see all the ripple effects. And now look, you got us Future Leaders here in Whakatane, some in Kawerau, some in Opo, wicked mahi, and just, yeah, shout out to the Inspiring Stories team. It has been myself, started the program in 2018 as a Future Leader, went on to as a catalyst, and I've been coached for 2 years. So it's definitely a space that acknowledges the whai wahitanga principle, as we said, where we're given these amazing spaces for us to grow and then eventually, become the leaders of that space. So thank you, Guy, and thank you to the team for creating such a cool area. And yeah, I think following on from that, another thing that relates back to whai wahitanga, you're going to hear a lot about it. So if you want to hear more, remember aratahi, manatahi training. But something that came out from my first Festival of the Future, which I recommend everyone go to next year because it's gangster, is that I was listening to Mehana Duri speak as the first speaker, and then for me, I was at a time where I was so low in my life, like I didn't know what I was up to, had a lot of stuff going on at home, didn't have a lot of opportunities, we're in a very rural area, and then came up when I heard him speak, Find Your Fish sort of started. He was like, if there's anything remember from my kōrero, it is to find your fish. And that, to me, that was like, find what you're passionate about and go hard. And yeah, so since then, using the tools that I learned through the Future Leaders program, and then all the different connections that we made, have been able to create this sort of limited company, as I accidentally registered for instead of something else. But it's all about learning. So we'll get there. But this really cool sort of kaupapa where myself and a few other of my mates who I live with, we deliver free programs based on what people want to learn. We deliver free workshops, and we're slowly starting our own small businesses so that it gives the rangatahi some work. What is that work training? They get paid, and then the extra money goes back into our company so that we can provide all of these free programs and workshops, and we don't have to rely on funding, because we all know how frustrating funding applications are. But I just wanted to put a bit of a little plug there, you know, if anyone wants to check us out. We've got a real cool workshop coming up in January, hopefully, with some mates in Auckland coming down to do a creativity workshop. And this is sort of like a kaupapa that's really awesome for the rural areas, because it's all about creating opportunities where there are none, really. And, you know, the big cities have all these cool things, but us rural communities don't have too much. But thank you, whānau. This has been amazing listening to you all. Expect some DMs, because I'm really keen to hear some more from you all. But I would like to pass it back to Denise, who finally we're getting to the questions and Q&A. So if you have any questions, pop them through.
Yes, please do. Thanks, Talei, and thanks, everyone. That was fascinating. We will come to your questions really soon. I think they're being curated for me in the back room. I hope so, because I'm not looking at the chat. So that would be really handy. But while we're sort of waiting for those to come through, I was interested in lots of the korero that was going on there. And one of the things was about being place-based, about the opportunities rural, the opportunities regional, the various things that you were saying, Guy, and you said something about being place-based, and I can't even read my own notes now because they're really scratchy, but what does place-based community-led development look like? Open to all of you, actually, just as we wait. What does that mean for Inspiring Stories, Guy, to start us off?
Kia ora. So I think the best version of place-based community development that we have happening is through that Future Leaders program, which is place-based in 6 different communities across the country at the moment. So Pōtiki, Kawerau, Whakatane, Greymouth, Whangarei and Kaikohi. And there's a curriculum, there's a framework that, you know, runs throughout the year and combines different layers of coaching, mentoring, workshops, capability building, project-based learning, different hui. But it's very much led by local people who live on the ground in those communities. So the first year that we tried to run it, we tried to do most of it kind of online and digital and through kind of Zoom and tools like that, and it didn't work. We had to very quickly shift to having local people on the ground, like Talei, that, you know, had mana, connections, lived experience in their place, you know, were ideally passionate about making a difference for rangatahi in their community, and were role models that other rangatahi could look to for kind of guidance.
And do they get to adapt things, thinking about some of the things that Madiha was saying, you know, about people working with the local people? And so you've got a structure or a framework. Do they get to move with that as they need to? And Gemma, you might have some thoughts about how this might work too, but Guy, is that how it works?
Yeah, so that's how it works. And Talei can speak, obviously, directly to this in her experience as a coach, but there's a framework, there's a curriculum, and there's a real delicate balance around fixed versus flexible, right? Like the kind of the projects, if you like, which rangatahi would engage in a different brief. So there's different impact challenges. So the first one of those might be around identity. You know, one might be around like connections in the community. One might be more broadly around an impact challenge where you, starting with a blank canvas, like what are the needs that you see in your community, and from a blank canvas, what would you like to develop to make a difference in that space, and like creating those stepping stones throughout the year so that hopefully it builds confidence, you know, to take on something that's a bit bigger or a bit more blank canvas by towards the end of the year. And rangatahi on the program, and with the support of coaches, have the kind of the autonomy to think about, okay, within those projects, what do we want to do? What are the needs that we see in our community? How do we want to respond to those? How do we want to kind of upskill and collaborate? And then there's some fixed parts of the program, like coming together for national hui, or, you know, these are kind of the timelines that we'd look to develop and implement some of those projects by, and obviously balancing obligations with funders who all expect, you know, compliance and reporting at a certain time.
Totally, it's such a balance, isn't it?
It's a real balance, eh?
Yeah. And it sounds like quite a lot of learning by doing too, that each one must be a little bit different, right? Gemma, I see you nodding, and I'm sure Talei has something to say as well, but what are you thinking, Gemma, as we talk about this?
Yeah, it's really cool. I guess we were really, really grateful to have the support of Trust Waikato come on as a funder for 3 years. They invested $375,000 into the co-design, the leadership group, to determine where they wanted to go with one outcome on how has an equity lens been applied. And so that really enabled the innovation and leadership to come from within the co-design group to be self-governing and determine what the best strategy was going to be for a cross-sector disruption from the inside out, really. But what we discovered along the way was that whoever's the one asking the questions holds the power. And so we came to a place where we were like, okay, what does it look like to let go of? And this is where it can become chaos. So there is a fine dance between chaos and order in this process. And as a facilitator, to be able to draw on the order when it's required, but also let go so that young people can determine and it truly be youth-led. So when we started asking, okay, well, what is the questions that we should be asking to move us to where we feel and sense we want to go? And that was a real game changer. So yeah, very different end of the spectrum, I think, with what Inspiring Stories have done, because this was an iterative startup process where the Future Leaders Program is well established and total fire, you know. So
and we need both, right, in all as well. Yeah. Thanks, Gemma. Madiha, you must have some thoughts on this. Like, how is this safe and inclusive? How does it work for you? How's it genuinely welcoming? Tell us what you're thinking, please.
I feel like it's really different when we talk about welcoming and safe, and how welcoming and safe looks like for one person might be different for how it looks like for another person. And so whenever someone asks me this question of how can we make a space safe for ethnic young people, and I want to put it out there that ethnic is such a broad term. When we say ethnic young people, so many ethnicities come under this title, and all these people are from all different backgrounds and lived experiences, and it's really, really different. And so whenever I feel like I'm representing ethnic young people, I feel this responsibility that am I actually being a voice, or not even being a voice, because that's not for me to be a voice, but when I'm asked to be a representative for the ethnic communities, it's like a lot of responsibility as to whether or not I am you know, being the right person or talking on behalf of all these people. And so I feel like whenever someone asks me this question, my answer is very simple, and that's asking questions, and ask, because each person, even within a community, each person has different lived experiences and different perceptions of what a safe space looks like for them. So if you want to create safe spaces, just asking questions. How can I make this place safe for you? What would make this space more welcoming for you? And just asking those questions, it just solves so many problems.
It sounds like also asking questions can start to bridge that power gap that Gemma was sort of saying too. So if you ask questions and other people have answers and they're empowered to answer questions back, does that kind of work?
Yeah, I think definitely when we're asking questions, we're giving people that platform to share what actually feels safe for them. Because even if I am talking as an ethnic representative as to how can we make spaces safe, I would like to acknowledge that I have my own biases as well. I have my own perceptions, and I was born and raised in a different place, and my answer might be biased by my own perspectives, whereas that might not be a correct answer for a different ethnic person. So there's that struggle between me put there to represent all the ethnic young people, whereas experiences of different ethnic people are so different.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very complex, and it sounds also that there need to be multiple young people and being really open to listening and to bringing others, the loose connections of the loose connections, if you like. So how much is enough? You know, when do you get to a point where you can act, whoever the you is, whether it's, yeah, any thoughts? Not just you, Madiha, not putting you on the spot here, but got any thoughts on that to start us off, and the others might want to jump in too. And then I've got a really long question to read.
I think that is a really tricky question, is how much is enough? Because as I was talking about earlier, like when we talk about ethnic, there's so many ethnicities that come under this. And so how much is enough? How much can we say that, you know, this is? But I feel like I don't have an answer to that question as to how much is enough. But what I do have the answer to is that we can start from somewhere. We can start from somewhere. And it feels really good for me to now go and see in the youth sector that it is being acknowledged that ethnic youth voices needs to be heard. Whereas before that wasn't even on the table. That wasn't even a question to consider. And so, although yes, I don't know how much representation is enough. What I do know is that what you can't see, you can't be. And when I don't see myself being represented in different places, not just within youth sector, but within governance, within the wider, for example, I'm a law student, within the wider legal system. And everywhere I go, if I don't see myself in those people, I will always feel like that's something that I cannot be. And so even starting from somewhere, it's better than nothing. So
That's a good answer.
how much is enough? At least start from somewhere. And I really, really want to put it out there that when we talk about inclusion and diversity, let's not just make it a tokenistic approach where we want to have people just so that we can tick the boxes that, oh, we've got a diverse workplace, we've got a diverse co-design crew, for example, whereas it's genuine diversity. We actually want those people to be there, and we celebrate them for who they are, and we actually listen to what they have to bring on the table, and we're making sure that we make them feel like they're there because of what they contribute rather than the title that they bring to the table, just so that we can tick the box of diversity.
Yeah, I can see there's lots of agreement there. Sounds like enough is an evolving thing, which it should be. New possibilities emerge, but it's about actually also that whole idea of collaborating and acting, maybe not always for people, but with people, and even as a community, inclusive of each other. Gemma, Guy, do you want to add anything to that conversation? Probably.
Thank you, Madiha. It just kind of reminded me of some of the study that I did for my master's, which looked at three things. One, like science surrounding climate change. Two, some of the attitude and behaviour change psychology, and then how kind of narrative and storytelling can play a role in changing attitudes and behaviour. And a lot of what that boiled down to was the importance and power of positive role models that people can connect with and relate to, you know. So thinking about in the design of the programs we run or governance structures, just again emphasising the importance of those relatable role models, you know, especially for a diverse range of our rangatahi, to be able to have the opportunity to connect with different role models and peers and champions who can kind of awhi and support them into the future is just, yeah, really important.
So there's some questions here. I'm just noticing time that are about, here's an example. Let me just read that. Is there a template that can be used on social media to attract rangatahi to a community organisation? Resilient Russell Charitable Trust consists mainly of elderly folk, and we're concerned that the young will be inheriting our town, but are not stepping up to be part of our mahi. Any thoughts or questions on that? Anybody?
Oh, well, I'm unmuted, so I'm happy to have a first crack at that. It's not an uncommon question, and it's certainly a question that I've seen and come across before. So it seems to be a shared challenge in multiple places and communities. And whilst absolutely some rangatahi and young people can spend a lot of time on socials, and that can be a place to engage and connect, I wouldn't necessarily like set that as the default, as the go-to place to engage and attract rangatahi into your kaupapa and organisation. I still feel like, social media, there's a huge amount of misinformation and mistrust, and if it's not already like a close circle that you hold, there's probably a bit of fear around interacting with new people who are reaching out to me to take part in a thing that I know nothing about. And again, I'd preface the importance or emphasise the importance of those face-to-face, kanohi to kanohi, in-person relationships, and make time, you know, to reach out and actually get to know young people face-to-face in your community. And probably that approach, actually, I would say, first and foremost, over starting with social. So start face-to-face and take time to engage authentically.
I remember Jim Deers saying to us, go where the people are, go and join them where they are. And I can see some nodding there. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that, face-to-face. Gemma?
Yeah, totally echo what Guy shared. And I think it's really important that we become mindful of the ways that we talk about young people. Something I heard just there is that, you know, the young people aren't stepping up to come to where you want them to be. And actually, if we can come and be present with our young people at where they're at, that they're stepping up to a lot in their own lives. And if we could get curious about what that is and how we might actually meet them there, that's how we're going to build a great reciprocal relationship and start to work across generations.
Yeah, awesome response. Thank you, both of you. Talei, there's a question for you. How do you initially engage with rangatahi through schools, etc., is what's written down here. Tell us a bit about how you go about it.
Through schools. I usually, because I went to Whakatane High School and had quite a good relationship, so I just use all of the relationships that I already have and then talk to whoever I know to get to who I need to talk to. And I also coach volleyball, so I've coached for about 7 years now, and so all of our high schools are a part of the same competition, so you get to know the coaches, you get to know the teachers in charge. And again, yeah, just using those connections from there. Okay, I'm like, okay, wanting to do this, we're going to be having this on, who can I connect with? And then they sort of pass on the information. But for me, I'm someone who likes to go into a whole lot of different roles, to meet new people, to fill my kitty with different tools. And through that, there's just making those connections. So I reckon you either just emails, sometimes emails are good, but I'd just go into the school and say, I'd like to talk to the principal about this, and then have a cool video. I remember when I was in school, whenever someone came to assembly and had a cool video, I'd be like, I want to know more about that, you know? And then just having giveaways or something like that, where young people are like, that is so cool, I want to learn more about that. Getting there, getting in front of them, but just using whatever connections you have to get into that space. That would be sort of my tips.
Yeah, no, those are great tips, Talei. What are you thinking, Madiha? How do people connect with rangatahi in authentic and useful ways that help to awhi rangatahi in the spaces they want to be in?
I think I agree with everything that was said earlier. Definitely meeting young people where they're at. And sometimes or being a youth worker myself, sometimes it's really, really hard to engage with young people. And I think finding what really works for them and being flexible enough to move around what works best for young people, because again, it's about them and not about me. And so keeping that in mind as to what works for my youth the best. And I think how I get to know about what works best for them is asking them. So simply asking what works best for you, but what's the best way that I can contact you? What's the best thing that we can do this? And what would you like to do? What are the support and what are your challenges and how can I support you there? So I think for me, it's very simple, asking them and not being a voice for them, but giving it to them and making sure that they feel heard.
Sounds like showing up, listening, and then I guess awhi/acting together is a bit of a summary.
Definitely.
Awesome, thank you. Gemma, I know that you've been thinking about the connection with community-led development, like more overtly perhaps. What are your reflections on how we awhi rangatahi to be the heroes, as you like to call them, which is such an awesome way of talking about it?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we look at what is calling us to go to be in proximity to young people. Is it our strategic plan? Is it our own personal agendas? Or is there a genuine and authentic calling for us to come and be part of supporting young people to rise? And so my journey, I think, over the last 5 years has really, I think, brought to the forefront just the importance of looking at that self-leadership piece and how something comes together and how that's led by the community and not an organization or an individual. And I think I really want to touch on the importance of decolonizing our minds and decolonizing our organizations, because we run the risk of unintentionally causing more harm than good without understanding our actual and perceived power, our privilege, and how that then is influencing the ways in which we show up. So, you know, decolonizing our minds, decolonizing our leadership, decolonizing our approaches, decolonizing governance, like, this is really important because we are going to meet projects, places, and people at the depths that we've met ourselves. And I think as a Pākehā woman, it's been really important for me to understand my privilege and the unintended impact and consequence of not being aware of that in a facilitation. So yeah, I just want to do that little plug right there.
Totally agree. It's a very good and sometimes quite tough learning space to be in, right? But as well as privilege, what I'm hearing there is motivation matters, and being conscious of our motivations, and perhaps even being up for changing those, you know, in fact, probably definitely being up for changing those. I'm watching the time, actually Rachel's watching the time and telling me about the time, and I'm thinking we need to do a quick last reflection before we sort of close off, but maybe a couple of words from each of you. I'll start with you, Guy, just, you know, before we go into the final messages, what would you like to leave people with today?
Yeah, one of the areas that we haven't had the opportunity to lean into, Denise, that I'm reminded of is, like, COVID is impacting all of us, and the impact is different for all of us. And I think especially for young people, you know, who have the biggest stake in the future, we cannot underestimate the impact of COVID, especially on education or lack of access to, the disruptions to education, learning, career pathways, mental health, you know, so many factors that sit as part of that. And I think relatively the level of whether it's funding from government, whether it's funding from philanthropy, whether it's corporate sponsorship, like the kind of the level of investment into improving the well-being of rangatahi in this country, I think is relatively low. And actually, I think this is a time where rangatahi and young people need our collective awhi and support and investment more than ever. So that's just a whittle challenge that I'd like to
yeah, just a little one. Thank you
today. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora. That was a great few last thoughts there, and a whittle as well. Madiha, what are you thinking? What are your final thoughts you'd like to leave people with today?
I think my final thoughts would be, and something that I would love to leave people with, is let's be open. We can be a community, a society that can be an example for other communities and societies in terms of how can we be a better and kinder society? How can we create New Zealand a kind and warm place for all people? And I think a very simple step is ask questions, be observant, be open, look around the room, look whose voice is missing, look who is not engaging, why they're not engaging, be curious, be open, so that we create a space where every individual feels loved and accepted and worthy. Good.
That's awesome, Madiha. Some great strategies, or some startings of strategies there too. Gemma, what are you thinking? Final words, please.
Final words are just that,
just for today.
This work is from the heart. It's first from the heart, and then we draw on things from our head, from our mind. And the more that we can be in community with other people who are wanting to achieve similar things, the more that we'll have a safe space to question not only our approaches, but the collective approach, and draw insights and inspirations and be challenged. So just love wins, come from the heart and then up to the head.
Awesome, and that's great too, especially, I guess, speaking as a Pākehā, that's often not where we are taught to come from, so it can be something we have to learn. Talei, some final words from you too. Thank you, beautiful co-host. I loved co-hosting with you.
You too, thank you for having me. And yeah, just want to acknowledge our panelists and what they have said. I agree with all of them. But some words that I get, just realizing that this is a Rangatahi leadership sort of webinar. We're all wondering how we can work with the Rangatahi better. I think we have to value our Rangatahi more, you know. So if we're trying to get young people in and get there, what do you guys want? You know, talk to your young people. Like Madiha said, you just need to go and talk to them. But when you're talking to them, you're taking some of their knowledge as well. And if you were in a business sort of transaction and you're going to hire a consultant, you're going to pay them. So pay your young people, you know, pay them what they're worth. If it's not in money, then some sort of a koha or a gift, but to show them that you value them, you value what they have said, and it's sort of like they're exchanging their information. So you exchange something for them as well. Because a lot of the time, our young people are getting taken advantage of, and they're like, wicked, free pizza, wicked, free kai. They're worth more than that. So show them their worth. But yes, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. That's a really important thing too. I think that's pay people what they're worth. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. It was a real pleasure to be in the room with you today, and all of you in the audience as well. I've got a couple of notices to read out just as we're a little bit over time. So there is a poll up. Please do that if you can, and let us know how it's going, because we're always learning as well. And then there's a slide up right now. Look at that. There it is. An upcoming building block. These are online workshops, and this one is called Growing Collaborative Teams and Communities, as you can see. It's hosted by Anna and Kendra from Inspiring Communities, and it's really for people who are looking for ways to deepen connections in their team or communities, to build trust, things that we've talked about today, and to navigate competing needs. I guess when we bring diversity into the room, we bring difference in the room, and it can become a competition. It can, so how do we work through that? The skills and tools that Kendra especially will lead here explore the possibilities of the SCARF model to do that. She's super experienced in that. And these building blocks are collaborative sessions. Cost is not an issue. Just get into them and take part, so you can bring your own stuff along as well. And then the second thing that's on that slide is about the Human Learning Systems, which is an ebook. David Hanna, who's part of Inspiring Communities, is being part of this launch of this through the Centre for Public Impact, and it's exploring new ways of working for public service. So there's an Aotearoa launch on the 3rd of November at 9:30 for an hour and a half. Both of them are free, both of those events are free, and there'll be details included in the follow-up as well. You'll also get a recording and some slides from this session too after today if you've registered. So I hope you've enjoyed the korero today. For now, I offer my thanks again to the panel for sharing so much with us in such a short time, so much to say. And thank you to all of you who attended as well for your thoughtful questions. Thanks too for the backroom tech support. We couldn't do it without you. I couldn't anyway. And I'll close us with a karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairoa i te ara tangata, koe rai rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, homie, huie, tae kie. Go well, everyone. See you next time. Mā te wā.